There we go. Myrna and Dove, this mic is all yours.
Thank you. Hi, Dove.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning. I just made it back in time.
And Dove,
Yes.
And I even got today's lesson and the commentary from Ken Wapnick. Today's lesson, of course, is I am not a body. I am free. And Ken Wapnick says, which I love, I just love his commentary. He says, the main point in this lesson is that not being a body means that we are a mind. Oh, that's a big difference. I have nothing to do with this body other than it's my vehicle. It's the car I drive, but that's about it. I'm the driver. I'm not the car. I'm the dreamer. I'm not the dream. Therefore, I made this choice that imprisoned me, which I now undo with Jesus' help. Yeah, I made a choice to listen to the car instead. And whenever I listen to the car, guess what? I always do something. I'm always going somewhere, and it always gets me into trouble. How's that? Over to you, Myrna.
You're going somewhere gets you into trouble? Explain that.
Yeah, well, like for instance, I got a charge on my Amazon thing. It says from Wells Fargo. It says, we don't recognize this. Is this you? So I had to drop Happy off at the groomer, but I called them instead first, and I knew I was due here in a half hour. Why did I do all that? I could have just taken my time and relaxed. Well, I did call them and they stopped the card. And then after they stopped the card and they're going to send me a new card, they say, oh, well, you know something? We had the same charge last month. Well, obviously somebody is using my card who I gave it to, and it's just a monthly charge. And she tells me after she stops the card. So now that's the kind of thing I'm saying, like, why did I have to run and call them? Why did I have to go do something? Why didn't I just stop and be peaceful, and then everything would take care of itself? Truly. Over to you.
That's great, though. It's a good learning lesson. We learn things every single day, just like that. Yes, we do jump to our defense. The ego tells us that unless we do it now, all havoc will break loose. And as you say, that's not the case at all. So it's a good learning opportunity. And yes, I am not a body. I am free. That's one of my favorite lessons. Again, I always say certain lessons are my favorite. Well, this is really one of my favorite, because it really point blank tells us that we're not a body, we're a mind, period, point blank. I don't think anybody other than A Course in Miracles student, teacher, Course in Miracles reader would really understand what that means. I mean, you can't even tell somebody that, and yet we know it. We've excelled in our learning enough to understand that what it means. And the ego is confined to the body. That's it. The ego is confined to the body. That's where it is. Controls the body, directs the body, enforces its own rules upon the body, and the body obeys. Whereas a mind is not something you can touch, but it's there, and it's outside of the body. And that is where all power lies, and all understanding and all healing lies. And the Course in Miracles, I understand too about sickness. Yes, the body will get sick. We do acknowledge it, but it depends on the degree to which we acknowledge it. I've learned that even sickness can be controlled, even pain can be controlled if you just don't invest too heavily in it. We all feel pain. That's what the body does. But for me, pain is something that I don't pay too much attention to, really. I'll take a Tylenol, or, you do what you have to do. But I don't worry about pain. I don't. And I've come a long way that way, because when you detach from the body, you recognize, okay, this is just an illusion, and it is an illusion whether we want to admit it or not. We do have the power to heal from all pain, both emotional, both physical, and knowing that we have that power, we can now try to implant it in one way or another. We pray to God, we ask for help, we cite an affirmation, we just know inwardly and completely that the body is there just to lead us through the world while we're still alive, while we're still here. But we can also learn a lot and use the body to its advantage. Use the body to be kind, use the body to be loving, use the body to embrace somebody when they're needing it, and so forth. So I really do like this lesson. I'm just going to read one paragraph from my book, because it's a whole paragraph. I want to read just part of the paragraph, because my book, Private Lessons with Jesus, is my dialogue with Jesus, my asking him what I should be hearing. That's really what it is. And I only typed what I thought I was hearing. Anyway, this last part of the paragraph says, the body is an illusion. So how can it attach itself to sickness and death if it is not of God? The ego believes this reasoning to be insane, but in truth, it is the ego that is insane, as it prefers to sacrifice the body to death rather than recognize God's truth. All pain and suffering are the result of the ego's madness. However, while in this world of form, the body can serve a greater purpose when it is used as a vehicle to instill love, its only real purpose. God did not create his children to be slave to the body, but to live in him and be free. So if God is not a body, and we can live in God by recognizing that the body is an invention of the ego, and to take it from there helps me a lot. So anyway, I turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, talking about the body, when you talk about the body, you're also talking about the ego. The body, as you say, is run and ruled by the ego. In fact, the world was made by the ego to distract the Son of God from remembering that he's not a body, that he's a mind. So the body is our biggest distraction. And of course, the stories of the body are, at least, and I've been sharing that for the last week or so. My stories when I was a kid, and I tell those stories over and over. I've told you the story. I've been on this thing, and the story is just a cover up that I chose to be unhappy. Remember, I chose to be unhappy. That's what was uncovered in last week's Amy Anderson Freedom of Forgiveness. So I don't know if it was Regis or somebody. I was listening to them, so I went. They posted something. It says it's the ego is. I don't know what they posted. The ego is the proof that strength is weak and love is fearful. So I wanted to know where that came from. So I did a search, and what do you think it shows up? It's the 12th of the what is questions in the workbook, which is called What is the Ego? And I'm going to read from it because it's really a powerful thing. What is the ego? The ego is idolatry. Thou shalt not have any idols before me. Well, that's the first of the 10 commandments. And that's the first thing that we do. We put the body before the spirit and the love of God. So how could you possibly remember the spirit and the love of God if all you're thinking about is preserving and surviving your body? And that becomes our numero uno primary purpose, is taking care of my body. I'm going to read it. So it says, The ego is idolatry, the sign of a limited and separated self, born in a body, doomed to suffer and to end its life in death. So whenever you hear Jesus or Ken Wapnick saying, the Holy Spirit's purpose is to have you recognize and realize how much you're really suffering and you don't even realize it. And he says, unless you realize you're suffering, you're not going to change your mind about anything. So the people that say, well, I don't really need this course because my life works, as Ken Wapnick says, if your life is working, you don't really need this course, please. This is only for people who realize that there's something going on that isn't right. And you want to see, is there another way of looking at this? And that's exactly what the course gives you, another way of looking at it. It goes on to say it's the will it's the will of the ego, small w will, that sees that will, capital W, of God as enemy, that sees the will of God as enemy and takes a form in which it is denied. So the ego is the proof that strength is weak and love is fearful, life is really death, and what opposes God alone is true. And yeah, I have my own will, don't I? I have a free will. I can do anything I want, right? Yeah, I can call up the bank and tell them to cancel my card when that was a stupid mistake. But be grateful for your mistakes, for your triggers, because they reveal your mistaken beliefs. Yeah, I thought there was something to be afraid of. They are charged $15.89. And I get a letter from Wells Fargo saying, if you didn't do this and you don't know who, we're going to decline and stop your card. I said, yeah, I agree with that. After I called up, she said, oh, by the way, they did the same thing last month. I said, why didn't you tell me that before? And yeah, I'm blaming the person at the bank. The ego loves that stuff. Blame, shame, guilt. You got to laugh. You got to laugh. Over to you, Myrna.
So my question is, when they asked you about the charge last month, did you recognize the charge when they said it was? You didn't anyway.
No, so the woman at the bank, she kept it very simple. She says, oh, that's right. We sent you a notice last night in the middle of the night that this charge was declined because it looks suspicious. If you don't call, we're going to cancel the card. I called just before I took Happy to the groomer, and I already promised you I was going to be here in a half hour. And I did all of this. I had to squeeze it in. Whenever you squeeze anything in, you could be sure it's the ego. Spirit doesn't squeeze anything in. Over to you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I've done that too, really. Oh, yeah. Suddenly I have to do something about it. I have to do something.
I'm thinking of the insurance company that uses a guy with a Band-Aid on his face, and he calls himself like distress. Or does anyone know the word I'm looking for? It's an insurance company. He causes people to have accidents.
I don't know.
All right. If you don't know, it's okay. It's okay. Maybe someone in the room knows. I don't know. Anyway, Regis is saying, if your life is working, you don't need this course. Yes.
I was talking to Susan Michelle. Actually, I did a Zoom talk with her yesterday. And, I was telling her, all my appliances seem to be breaking down at once. My pool, the motor is not working suddenly. My dishwasher is not working. And my air conditioning is not working all at once. How could this happen all at once? And Susan's rendition of all this is that, well, when you are moving consciousness from one place to another, because everything is connected, everything sort of happens at the same time. She said somebody wrote a paper about that, actually. So, and truthfully, there would have been a time I would have been up in arms and I would have been very frightened by all this. I suppose everything, my appliances, what's happening. But I realized that, what I did? I called the electrician. I called the people, and that's all I can do is place a phone call and tell them what's happening and just wait for them to show up and help me. That's it. And I got to tell you, I didn't lose any sleep over it. I didn't give it another thought. So I must have come a very long way too. You don't have to buy into anything, nothing. And we're given lessons in which we somehow learn from it one way or another. I'm proud of my reaction, really, which was, it'll be okay. Everything will be okay. Just turn it over to God. And we can do that with everything. We can just turn it over to God. And, you know, we just think, you know, let's face it, you know, the holy instant. What's the holy instant? That was implanted to help us eliminate the concept of being a body, right? The holy instant was an idea that, or not an idea, it's a truth that at that moment, connecting to God, we can see it all. We can see that moment of truth and not have to worry about anything. It takes us out of time and into oneness. And that's really where we need to be, into oneness. And when we're a body and we're strictly ego, we don't see that at all. We see ourselves as separate. Everything is separate. Everything is separate and apart from us. But that moment of truth, the holy instant, gives us the understanding that we're not alone. We're definitely not alone. I feel that. And then we can react accordingly. And, you know, I don't know, you have Netflix. I watched a very interesting movie, Inventing Anna. Did you see that at all?
Not yet, but maybe I will now that you recommend it.
Yeah, it's a mini series and it's a true story. And this is a story of, you know, a young woman who came to the United States in her 20s, and she presented herself as a German heiress. And she infiltrated herself into the inner circle of the city's biggest socialites, lawyers, business people, banks. You know, during her time in New York City, she scammed countless people, hotels, banks, using invalid credit cards, fake bank statements, to create, as they say, the illusion of wealth. She created the illusion of wealth. Through the illusion of wealth, she was able to scam her way up to $275,000. She was a socialite. It's an amazing story about how she did it. She looked the part, she acted the part, and people bought into that. So, you know, and the end result, the end of the story is that she's finally caught. And she's sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison. She only serves 2 years. She gets out on good behavior, and then she's deported back to Russia, where she came from. Anyway, she got back to the United States. Now, the aftermath is that she's in she's in an apartment in Chelsea or somewhere on the Lower East Side, and she's under house arrest because she overstayed her visa. She came back and she's in this apartment and she's under house arrest. So while she's under house arrest, she's having all these parties and she's attracting celebrities. Now they're all coming. This Netflix miniseries, she was paid $320,000 for that. And now they're going to do, she signed a deal to do a live reality show. And Jimmy Kimmel actually is also a talk show host, is one of the creators of this. So here she stands to make millions, I suppose, because of who she invented herself through the illusion of, you know, but anyway, it's all an illusion, and you have to laugh at it because people have bought into that illusion, and they got scammed. Anyway, you know, I think it has to do with the ego's desire for greed, for social standing. That's why people bought into this. You know, she said that she had a $67 million trust in her name, and she sold people, banks as well, on that by forgeries and all that. Very interesting. Yeah, you know, she's a hero. Today she's she's worked herself up to the extent that she's very well received, I suppose you might say. Anyway, so much for the ego.
Well,
Um,
it's funny that you tell that story, and you told it very well and in detail. And I'm thinking, when Jesus says, if your life is working for you, this course is not for you. All those people are inventing themselves the same as Anna invented herself, so that it appears to be very successful. They appear to be successful. And what's really going on, I think it was, it was, who's the Vienna, the guy from Vienna who invented the ego. What's his name?
we invented the ego.
No, Freud. So,
Kidding, I'm
so,
kidding.
so Freud is walking with his daughter down the street, and he says, "You see all those beautiful homes? It really looks like the people in there are, having a good time." He said, "But that's not true. None of them are really having a good time." That was Sigmund Freud, who understood how the ego operates. As it happens, I just put up paragraph 2 of what is the ego, and I'm going to read it. I also put it in. I put it in the
chat.
In the chat, so you can look at it.
Okay.
This is what it says. The ego is insane. So Anna was just another part of the insanity, but it seemed that the people who didn't invent themselves, they are just as insane, by the way. Okay,
Yeah.
the ego is insane. In fear, it stands beyond the everywhere, apart from the all. That's exactly what you said. If you went back 5 minutes ago, you said, we seem to be separate and apart from all of it. And the parts that's separate and apart is fear. Fear is what the ego is. And of course, fear can't trust anybody. Fear certainly doesn't think that what's good for me is or what's good for you. I want it too. So I want what you got, and fear is always afraid that it lacks and it's going to lose. So it has to win. And why do I think the world looks insane? Because the world is insane. So it goes on to say, in its insanity, it thinks it has become a victor over God himself. And in its terrible autonomy, it sees the will of God has been destroyed. It dreams of punishment and trembles at the figures in the dream, its enemies who seek to murder it before it can ensure its safety by attacking them first. So are we surprised that the world is always at war? Like I was quoting yesterday in my 3 o'clock Zoom class that Zuma and Karen are on. It was David Hawkins who was on the Oprah show, and he says, since the beginning of mankind's history, this world has been at war 97% of the time. So Oprah, with her light, says, does that mean that there's a chance that there's going to be some more time that we don't go to war? He said, oh no, the 3% was just, we were too sick from plagues and too poor from financial depressions to go to war, but we're always at war. So, I mean, why does it look any, I mean, in the history of mankind, we're always at war. Isn't that insane?
Yeah, it is insane. You think we can heal the world so there are no more wars? That's a possibility if we connect.
No, actually, you really can't. No, you can't heal the world. You can only heal your mind. The world is like your body. Sooner or later, the body goes, the world goes. That's why it says there is no world, but we can heal our mind.
Yes, we can't change the world. We can only change our mind about the world. But if we change our mind about the world, and by really giving the world more love, giving the world more, giving yourself over to God, consciousness, perhaps that will change the world too. Because if you change your mind about the world, and it's your world, and we're creating the world we see, doesn't that also change the world itself?
Well,
maybe we'll see less wars and so forth.
Well, if you look at the higher purpose, what is it for? To make the world more peaceful? I'm asking, what is the purpose of it?
To make the world more peaceful. What is the world? To make peace? Isn't that what everybody really wants to achieve? Peace.
Yeah.
But
but the ego made the world, and the ego doesn't even exist, but it's a distraction. It makes you think that there's something I can do, and I live in hope. One day, someday, there's going to be peace in the world. I mean, they've been saying that for hundreds and hundreds of years. One day there's going to be peace in the world. And peace never comes because it's the ego who's putting everything into the future. And the holy instant that you spoke about happens right now. And the truth is, as Jesus said, I'm in this world, but I'm not of this world. The idea is to remember that we never left home. We never left home.
yes.
Heaven is an awareness of perfect oneness. It has nothing to do with my physical being. Today's lesson is just about that. I'm not a body.
I am not a body. I am free. Imagine being free because you're not a body. I'm reading the chat that you put the paragraph that you put into the chat room. The ego is insane. In fear, it stands beyond the everywhere, apart from all, in the separation from the infinite. And that's true. You know, the all is mind. The all is consciousness. So you know, and it keeps us apart from the infinite, and the infinite is God. Listen, who wants God when we're, you know, we're achieving what we want to achieve? You know, I have the riches that I want. I have my business is doing great. I don't care how I, you know, become successful. I just want to be successful, but God gets in the way. You know, you know, so we push God out of the mix, so to speak. You know, we just want God away, and you know, and then the ego tells us, that very same voice that told us we don't need God, that very same voice also tells us to feel guilty and to fear God. Now we think we've uplifted or ousted God, and now we're feeling guilty. And the guilt causes more insanity because it's pain. Guilt is pain, and you get deeper and deeper into it. So, you know, because we think the will of God has been destroyed. So that deserves punishment, doesn't it deserve punishment? If we've pushed God out off the throne and we've taken his place, well, gee, God's going to find us, and we are now going to serve, you know, a terrible sentence here. And, you know, I have an uncle who lived always really, what can I tell you? His life was, he was into the, how do you call it? The gambling. He was a gambler, and he was indebted to them, and he got punched in the face. I mean, he lived on, you know, certainly not understanding God, certainly very prejudiced. Forget it, you know. I mean, extremely prejudiced. I mean, he was just never got it, never got anything in his life. But, you know, he was married to my aunt. He was part of the family. And I remember him visiting him in the hospital, and he was dying. And all he could say, looked at me and he said, "This is hell." That's what he said. "This is hell," as he was dying. And all I could do is hold his hand, kiss his hand, and say, "It's all okay." I mean, think about that. So here's a man, and I just thought of him really, who never believed in God. You certainly couldn't mention God to him. He was certainly not one to believe in that kind of thing, not believed in healing. And he lived a very destructive life. His money was always made from whether it be gambling and whether it be being deceptive or whatever it was. And here, when he was dying, even at that moment, he was lying there and saying, "This is hell." So of course he was afraid of God. He thought God was going to punish him. You know, it is. It's really so sad when you think about it, to have lived your life and knowing that you're probably going to have to come back and do it again, maybe in a more difficult way. Well, now I'm getting out of the realm of, what the Course in Miracles says, because the Course in Miracles says that in the teacher's manual, that reincarnation is really impossible when you think about it, because if we're not bodies, how can we reincarnate? I think what I believe, what I got from that is life goes on, eternal life. Life is eternal. So it has nothing to do with bodies. It has to do with consciousness. And if you get the love aspect and the healing part of what you're supposed to pick up in this lifetime, then you can take that with you and not feel frightened about dying, thinking that once the body is destroyed, it's over. I think about him sometimes. And I loved him anyway. He was a lovable bigot, like Archie Bunker, actually. Anyway, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. Just the idea, talking about the ego lives in hope. Hope is that tomorrow's going to bring a better day. If I do this, I'm going to get this done, and then things are going to finally change for me. Well, they may temporarily change. I'm not saying that they won't, but they're going right back because the only real problem, oh my God. Oh God. The only real problem is not what's going on with me, this body in the world. The problem is I have forgotten who I am. That's why lesson 199, which he says, any one of these last 20 lessons in this course is the entire course. So 199 is one of those 20 lessons. Tomorrow says there is no peace but the peace of God. So if you look for peace in this world, it's more foolery. It's more hope that something's going to be better. No, the ego is always in the idea that I can make things better. I can do more. I'll get more. And none of that means anything in the totality of it. You want to remember that you never let, you're talking about the guy said, this is hell. We never left heaven. This world is hell. There's no two ways about it. The world is hell. So I just put up in the chat, and I also put in the room the same thing. He says, this is from chapter 16, section 4. Your task is not to seek for love, because that's what the ego is always doing. Oh, I need someone to love. I want someone to love me. I want Jesus to love me. I want God to love me. But merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against the love of God, which you already have. But you blocked it by listening to a teacher that says you lack, you're unworthy. You better do something so you can finally have something so you can be worthy. That's how the ego operates. It goes on to say, it's not necessary to seek what is already true. You don't have to seek that you are the Son of God and that God loves you, but it is necessary to seek for what is false. Every illusion is one of fear. So fear runs this world. That's why the world will never be at peace. Fear runs this world. What the ego runs this world was made by the ego. Whatever form it takes, the ego is always in charge in this world of illusion, or in other words, distraction. And you might say, well, the world doesn't distract me. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch MSNBC. But I found out my biggest distraction isn't CNN and MSNBC. My biggest distraction is my own story. When I was 5 years old, this is what happened, and I'll never be the same. And I keep telling that story like it's true. You got to laugh. Goes on. Every illusion is one of fear, whatever form it takes, and the attempt to escape from one illusion into another must fail. Must fail. If you seek love outside yourself, you can be certain. And I like this. I'm going to repeat it, and I'm going to double down. If you seek love outside yourself, and Dove does do that too. I'm talking about myself. If you seek love, I'm tripling down. If you seek love outside yourself, you can be certain that you perceive hatred within and you are afraid of it. Yet peace will never, ever, 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 ever come from the illusion of love, but peace will never, ever, ever, ever come from the illusion of love, but only from its reality. I'm beginning to sound like Zuma.
Yeah, she's I can
Over-
understand that. Why not?
Yeah,
It makes a lot of sense.
yeah, over to you, Myrna.
Yeah, it brings me to the teacher's manual. You know, we talk about in fact, teacher's manual, page 29, how is peace possible in this world? And it goes on to say how peace can be possible in this world. When we see the world, like you say, full of, wars, there'll always be wars, and that, the world is conjured up by the ego and it's not a reality, and that we need to. Hi, Zulma, there you are. See, we used you as an example.
I've been here the whole time. I was listening on Pal Talk first, and I came over here. I've been listening the whole time.
Yeah, well, he gave you a wonderful compliment. He said he sounds just like you now.
I heard him. I was sitting right here, and I'm laughing. I had to finish laughing before I turned on.
So tell me, do you think peace is possible in this world? Yes. How would you describe that?
Well, I was back to when Dove asked it, I said that's supposed to be a trick question because there is no world.
Yes, right.
Let's start with that. Of course, it's not possible in this world as we know it because the ego created the world. So, and in the manual for teachers, it talks about that we live in it, but we realize that we're not of it. The peace that we see. First of all, anything that we're seeing in here, not out there. When it's the peace is because God is in my mind, not God is in the world. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say I can that we should lament the world, that we can change the world. It says all we can do is change our mind about the world. It's not the world at all. Besides, what world are we talking about? Your world or my world? Whose world? What world? There is no world. If it's not the same across the board, then it's not real. It has no existence. It has no permanence. So no, where there is no permanence, there can be no peace.
Yeah, that's true. We have to constantly, embody that. Really, that the truth. That's what it is. There is no world. And anytime anything comes up to refute that, that gives us fear. If we can only get into that place. And recognize it's not really happening. It's an illusion. Get past it. And I've tried that, and it works. It does work. I try it all the time. When something comes up that seems to be a threat that the world is throwing at me to give me fear. It is possible to walk past it, and that's how peace is possible in this world. So you don't have to be in the world. You don't have to be of the world. Just be in the world. We're living in the world. We have a body that seems realistic enough, but yet recognizing too that it's not everything. And when you start to give the ego its due, by not buying into it, then it's a way to peace. I love, to see the ego for what it truly is. As I said before, the ego conjures up a whole argument with someone. And then when you have the argument, the same ego tells us, now, look what you did. You made that person feel terrible. And now we look, so you can't really win with the ego. It wants to keep you impounded and in its vice. And that's what it is. And
the course teaches that only our allegiance to it makes it real. So I don't, as you're talking about it, even as you're talking about it, I'm saying to myself, but it's not real. But it's not real. It's not real. The ego, I talk and I say that on purpose. The ego thought system, the ego thought system, the ego thought system. I constantly say that because it's not a real thing. It's just a way we choose to think, and it's we're either thinking love, or we're thinking either an extension of love or call for love. We're either thinking peace or we're thinking war. We're either thinking but we're either thinking God or we're thinking nothing at all.
exactly.
And one of the workbook lessons says that if you're thinking about the past or the future, you're really not thinking at all. And that's where the ego resides, in the past and the future. It's just not real. It's a thought system. It's a thought system. It's a thought system. There is no ego. It's just, a fearful thought is what the Course says. It's literally a fearful thought. Yes, Dove, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. Again, today's lesson, I am not a body. And I'm going to repeat what Ken Wapnick's commentary is. He says, the main point of this lesson is that not being a body means that we are a mind. So let's keep that in mind, that we're not a body. And then I just put in the chat something else that Ken Wapnick said. I just found it, and I also put in the room. Jesus knew that his reality, capital R reality, was outside the world of bodies. And Ken Wapnick said that, and I quoted him and put that in the 12 core themes of A Course in Miracles. So as long as we want to make the world a better place to live, like, oh, I'm going to change this, I'll help with the climate change, I'll help with prisoners in prison and make them realize that there's another way of living. That's the ego says, don't worry, just do. There's no doing in being the Son of God. We don't want to be the Son of God. We want to make myself a better world to live in. And the ego loves that. I said, well, you better believe it's my world, it ain't God's world. And you know that sooner or later, I got you, because you're going to die in your body. But we're not a body. You got to laugh.
Gotta laugh. Gotta laugh. Gotta laugh. You said something earlier, Myrna, as walking through in the 23rd Psalm, it says, yea, do I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It says the shadow of death. It doesn't say I walk through the valley of death. There is no death. It's a shadow. It's just a shadow figure. And in the course in chapter 13, it says that the shadowy figures are exactly what we must escape. Well, it talks about the shadowy figures from the past, but it says the shadowy figures are precisely what we must escape. They are not real. They are not real. So even the whole concept of being afraid, of living in fear, the course also says that look at what you're afraid of. Only the anticipation will frighten you. It's never the thing. It's always our thoughts about the thing. There is no thing. It's like a movie in The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. He talks about, basically, he gives that example of, sitting watching a movie and on the screen, on the movie screen, let's say the actor is running. Well, we're not panting when the actor is running, but that's what we do. That's what we think we do. We watch the world happen, and we participate in this scene, this movie scene that's going on. And then we get all freaked out when we're out of breath, and then we want to blame it on the movie. We're blaming it on outside stuff. There is no outside stuff. But yeah, the shadow. It's all just a bunch of shadows.
Yeah.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me to paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil.
And you're walking through it. You don't pitch a tent. You don't pitch a tent there. Don't pitch a tent. You don't pitch a tent in the valley. You walk through. You keep on moving. Just keep it going. Keep it going.
Yes. God tells us right there, the shadow of death. Yes, I absolutely have understood it the way you have, that way. That it's just the valley of the shadow. And it tells us. It defines us. It defines it right there. Oh, I love that you brought that up. Yes. And, you also said the ego is past or future. Let's face it, anytime we're disrupted, anytime we're worried, it's always about the past or what the future may bring, or the past. Nothing is ever held sacred by the ego in the present. It's always a threat, past, future. And but we have to be aware of that. And it really does take a lot of practice. It takes not only understanding, yes, I understand it, okay, so now you understand it. What are you going to do about it? So like I've spoken with Doug previously, that he took the EST training. EST was one of the first types of, spiritual training, really. And
I did it too. I did EST.
You did EST, really? So that Yeah. So understanding is the booby prize, right? Isn't that?
You know, and what you're talking about, the habit, you know, the course says that the habit of engaging with God, I'll put it in the chat, the habit of engaging with God is, and his creations is easily made if you actively refuse to let your mind slip away. Actively refuse, not be tolerant of mind wandering, guarding our thoughts. Just, you know, and in every situation, you know, I always hear Dove saying, you gotta laugh, you gotta laugh. So I laugh a lot. I do. I look at things, I just kind of shake my head and says, really, really, and I chuckle it off most of the time. I do that. It says the problem isn't one of concentration, it's the belief that no one, including yourself, is worth consistent effort. We don't think that we're worth it. We think that we are all the misinformation that we've been given about ourselves, that we're not this enough, not that enough. We're not all the things that we were told, the things that we were compared to, and all that. The habit of engaging with God and his creations is easily made if you actively refuse to let your mind slip away. That is, don't watch the, when the movie is not doing what, change the channel. You don't have to watch the movie because that's always temporary. This is what's permanent. The course also says that that is the sleep of forgetfulness in the 16th chapter, the prayer. The sleep of forgetfulness is the unwillingness to remember. The sleep of forgetfulness is only the unwillingness to remember God's forgiveness and God's love. It's always there, but as you say, it takes practice and practice and practice. That's what we call practitioners. To call teachers of God here, and in other areas, they call practitioners. Practitioners practice. And in review 1, after lesson 50, we're reminded that it's not when things are all great and wonderful. That's not the time. It's when there's turmoil. It's when stuff is happening. That's the time to remember. That's the time. There's an expression, don't tell God how big your problems are. Tell your problems how big God is. That's the time to remember. When the things seem to be, it's when those conditions, those circumstances, those situations, when those things out there are rough and tough and seem like they're bringing us down. That's the time to remember where the kingdom is, to seek first the kingdom. That's the time.
Right. I like what you just said, that don't tell God your problems. Let your problems be healed by God. So it really works in reverse. It's true, really. Yeah. And that's the only way you can do it. That's the only thing that works. And by practicing it, we become, we understand that that's that works for us. And if we're seeing it working, am I much more peaceful now than I was 30 years ago? You bet your life. Okay, I picked up the Course in Miracles when I was in the throes and depths of hell because I was depressed and I was completely, out of touch with reality. And so the Course in Miracles has directed me down the path to truth and staying with it. And you're right, it's just a matter of doing it and doing it and doing it. And when problems come up, as you say, to just, that's the time. When turmoil comes up, that's the time to recognize that, okay, this is the time I have to take care of it. I have to now not worry about it. I have to know that God is there. I have to have, and know that it's true. And once you know it, how can you refute that? It works. It really does. And it's a matter of faith, trust. All this comes into play. Faith that it'll work out. And look where we are today. We are speaking of something that is so connected to God and so heartfelt. It's wonderful. It really is. Right now, I feel my heart just thriving, just in speaking with you and Dove and just discussing the truth. That's all there is truth. And I just love it. So anyway, thank you. Dove, you're there.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yes.
Thank you, Zulma, for taking
Yes.
over. I had to leave for a second. Anyway, coming back, I'm listening to the conversation, and I'm going to talk about my favorite word in the course, trust, Trust, to rely upon spirit totally. Keyword is totally. The reason we can't do that, by the way, and it's easy to say, as Zuma says, don't worry about your problems. Don't talk about how big your problems are. Tell your problems how big God is. The reason those are words and we cannot really use them is exactly what it says in lessons 47 and 48, which happens to be two of my favorite lessons. Lesson 47, God is the strength in which I trust. And by the way, God's strength and my strength is the same strength. It's not that God's stronger than me, So whenever I have problems, I'm seeing myself as weak. I'm seeing myself as an effect. If you talk about S, the one thing that S taught you is that you're responsible. You are the dreamer of the dream. You're not the figure in the dream. It's not that something out there is doing something to me. I asked for it and I received it exactly as I have asked. And then it says, deceive yourself no longer. So we do deceive ourselves. We think that the world is real. Remember, the world is what the ego made as a distraction from the reality that God creates. So when it says, God is the strength in which I trust, he starts off that lesson, and you can read, it's kind of funny. In paragraph 1, he says, if you're relying on your own strength, you have a lot to fear. He tells you that. Who are you to be counted on? I mean, what do you really know? I mean, and as Karen likes to say, if you really want to understand totally, you got to understand totality. Totality is to be understand how everything in this world works. Then you can do something about it. So the idea of having a problem and trying to fix my problem, of course, if I think I'm a body, I'm going to try and fix my problems. But I am not a body. I am mind. And as mind, I can look at the problem and say, nothing I see here really means anything, which is lesson number 1. I'm making something out of nothing, and I give meaning to it. That's lesson number 2. And I always say between lesson 1 and 2, that is the whole course. But my willingness to, thank you for putting that. If you want to understand totally, you have to understand totality. And you find that in chapter 7, section 7, at the very last sentence of that thing. And the name of that section is called Totality of the Kingdom. And that's where it tells you that you have already denied the power and the strength of God. You have already denied the love of God. And then he tells you in sentence number 2, he says, your denial is as total as love is. So as long as you live in, and we all live in denial, we didn't live in denial, we wouldn't be a body. It's that simple. If I didn't live in denial, I would not be a body. The fact that I think I'm a body is I am denying what I am. So we have already denied the love of God, and we say, I can do better. That's the ego's entire thing. I'm special. I know. I can do. I'm better. I'm different. One of the favorite things. All men are not really the same. Like a woman says, all men are the same. And a man comes to the defense and says, no, all men are not the same. I'm better. You gotta laugh. Over to you, Myrna.
That's funny. I like that. Yeah, I'm better, right? Well, that's the ego right there. I like that you pointed to lesson 47, because I've always, used this sentence, and I knew it was from the course, and here it is right here. Of yourself, you can do none of these things. I recite that line to myself often, and I really couldn't place where in the course it came from. And here it is popping out at myself. Of yourself, you can do nothing. And, we put we trust our own strength. And that's what the problem is. When you trust your strength, and it says right here, if you are trusting in your own strength, you have every reason to be apprehensive, anxious, and fearful. What can you predict or control? What can I control? What is there to be counted on? Another question. What is there in you that can be counted on? Nothing, I can tell you that. What would give you the ability to be aware of all the facets of any problem and to resolve them in such a way that only good can come of it? Well, we can't, no, of course not. I can't do anything that can resolve every aspect of every problem and expect only good to come of it. So it really gives us one question after the other, and every question in this first paragraph has to give us food for thought, and question our own strength, question our own belief in our strength other than the strength of God. So it's this is, and I think experiences of life give us those answers, because we get kicked in the ass plenty, don't we? So, and I love, somebody, I hear that often, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, how can you expect a different result? And we do the same thing over and over again, except the ego is so clever and it puts that same thing in different forms. So we think it's something different, but it's really the same thing over and over. So it's a good learning device, this book.
And I just want to mention the one that gives us a good kick in the butt is ourself. That's why lesson 196, I think it is. 196, which is one of the 20 lessons that Jesus says is the entire course. It can only be myself I crucify. Who's kicking me in the butt? Oh, I know it's the person that misused my credit card. No, I asked them to do that so I can suffer. I have denied the peace and the love of God. And in lesson 190, again, one of the last 20 lessons, he tells you in paragraph 8, he says, hey, listen, the reason that you're in pain and you choose pain instead of joy is that you wanted to deny your Father the joy and the glory and the happiness of his Son. So you paid a handsome reward to make sure that your Father knew how unhappy you are. Read it, paragraph 8, lesson 190. You gotta laugh. I'm doing this to myself, really? You gotta laugh.
Yeah.
What lesson was that, Dove? The last one you just
lesson
mentioned?
190, paragraph 8. If you want, you can put it up on the chat. It'd be worth. It was only a minute ago, but I also want to mention tonight. Please join us for finding your own inner teacher, which is how ACIM Gather began, to develop trust in finding your own inner teacher. So that's tonight at 7 o'clock, and I'm going to read it. Thank you so much for putting up. She just put up lesson 190, paragraph 8. Pain is the thought of evil taking form and working havoc in your holy mind. Pain is the ransom that you have gladly paid not to be free. In pain is God denied. This is the focus. In pain, you are denying God, the Son he loves. I don't know. Whose phone is that? Mine? Or is that yours, Zilma? Is that yours?
Mine.
All right. In pain, does fear appear to triumph over love, and time replace eternity and heaven, and the world becomes a cruel and a bitter place where sorrow rules and little joys give way before the onslaught of the savage pain that waits to end all joy in misery. And that he's telling you why you're not living in joy and happiness now, because you wanted to be in pain so your Father will feel sorry for you and let you back into heaven.
Yeah.
You gotta laugh.
Yeah, you gotta laugh. You gotta laugh. Yeah. And I just picked up 190, and it's very apropos. It really is. All the lessons are really, but certain ones really, they really drive it home. That's why I call some of them my favorite lessons. Anyway.
Thank you, Zuma, for joining us. Myrna, thank you.
A pleasure.
As always, Lynn.
Can I save the chat?
Over to you.
Thank you guys so very much. What a wonderful hour. And we're live on YouTube, and it's just beautiful to have that ability. You can go there and look at, and you can also listen live on the radio. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the live stream real quick and show you